when we looked at Babylon Revisited, we see a story that has come after this period of great, ebullience, this joyful age, this time of carefree spending, if you will. And it comes, written, as I said, in 1931, or published in 31, comes after, of course, the collapse of the economic world. The Great Depression did not just hit in America. October 1929, that Black Tuesday, as it's called, did cause a great sink in the Wall Street in this country. But that depression actually was worldwide. It hit every place. And so you have this story set after that, where you see consequences of this lifestyle, because we see Charlie talking about, reminiscing about his previous life when he and Helen were first married and were living in Paris, and he had his job, and they were making all sorts of money, and they were able to just spend it any way they wanted to, and they were going out every night to clubs, and they ran around with a group of people who also had money, and then suddenly everything changed. The editor of the book offers a few comments about Fitzgerald, his background. They talk a little bit about his wife, Zelda. Talk about the Fitzgerald lived mainly in Europe between 1924 and 1931, pursuing a nomadic, expensive bohemian lifestyle, saturated in alcohol. Having spent nearly $113,000 in 4 years. Now, and the editor gives you this equivalent. That's like 1.5 million in today's terms in 4 years. So they're spending over $300,000 a year, over basically $30,000 a month is what they went for. Now things didn't cost that much. They didn't quite spend that much, but they still spent it's $113,000. Well, that's still, in 4 years, you're looking at spending almost $30,000 a year. So $2,000 to $3,000 a month is what they were spending. That's a very lavish lifestyle they were living. And he wound up in debt at that time. So he'd already published 2 of his great novels, The Beautiful and the Damned and The Great Gatsby, and that's what he was living off of. He was living off the royalties from those 2 books. They were in other stories he wrote. He was making money from that, but as much money as he was making from those, he spent, and even more. And that's when he started trying to write some more stories, getting those published so he could make some sort of income. This is one of those stories that gets written in this time, 1931. The supposition is he probably started on it in 1930 and did not get it published until 31. But it's in 1930 that you start seeing a breakdown within his family. Zelda, his wife, has a nervous breakdown, has to go to a sanatorium for help. His daughter, Scotty, she was named after her father. Scotty wound up having to be placed in the care of a nanny, because the wife is in Switzerland, the daughter is put into an apartment there in Paris, and he goes back and forth constantly between the two. And so he's always going back and forth, trying to write the stories, trying to come up with as much money as he could, trying to clear himself from debt, and trying to come up with enough money to afford the bills at the sanitarium, and then also to keep his daughter in some sort of comfort. Eventually, Scotty is sent to boarding school. And it says he was fending off the efforts of Zelda's disapproving sister to assume custody of Scotty. And that becomes a very close parallel then in Babylon Revisited. Because this is what we see. Charlie Wells is trying to regain his daughter. Marion, his sister-in-law, is taking custody after the death of Helen. Charlie's career has collapsed. He has to find a job. He winds up finding a job. He's doing fairly well now. He's doing fine. He's making money. Not extravagant money, but he's making money where he can live comfortably. And he wants his daughter back. Well, this is, paralleling what was taking place with Fitzgerald's own life. And as it says here on page 691, Fitzgerald reminisced about that life in a letter to Zelda as he's writing. Zelda, you were going crazy and calling it genius. I was going to ruin and calling it anything that came to hand. I think everyone far enough away to see us outside of our glib presentation of ourselves guessed at your most megalomaniac selfishness, mind-say indulgence, and drink. Toward the end, nothing mattered. And Zelda, this was several years later, Zelda wrote back, you were literally eternally drunk. And this is what we see with Charlie in the story. Charlie now goes and says he has only one drink a day, just to prove it to me. Not always the best way to deal with that, but that's why he's doing so. Again, the impression. The editor goes on and gives you some more details about the background of the era, what was taking place in this time, what life was like. Fitzgerald, on page 693, Fitzgerald described the 20s as the most expensive orgy in history. It was borrowed time. The whole upper tenth of a nation living with the institutions of Grand Dukes and the casualness of course girls. Memorializing is easy now, and it's pleasant to be in one's 20s in such a certain and unworried time. That again is from Fitzgerald. So this is how the world was. After World War I, people just lived for the day. You know, that carpe diem attitude. So that who cares about anything else? And then suddenly you have the crash. And that becomes a key aspect. And this raises a point on page 696 about morality. These are a couple of comments. Again, some of this you might want to consider when you're looking at your research paper topics. I gave you the idea about moral choice and decisions. That's why your research paper topic, where you have the much more extensive work and much more extensive research. But this has a couple of comments that you can actually maybe draw from. It says that what was involved in the 20s, as many commentators suggest, time was a profound shift in outlook and ethics. The death of the old morality, the birth of the new. The old Puritan morality, seen as hopelessly outmoded, repressive, damaging to women, emphasized self-control, self-sacrifice, and faithful adherence to rules and traditions. In its place, the new morality instead championed self-expression, self-indulgence, encouraging men and women alike to flout any rule, law, or tradition that might infringe upon their individual liberty. Whereas the old morality taught one to keep an eye on the future in order to ensure one's self and the country of their tomorrow, the new ethos, this new ethical stance, encouraged every individual to live fully and freely in the here and now, leaving both the country and the future to take care of themselves. And this goes on talking a little bit more about this conflict, what happened. And this can be part of what we look at. This is a situation that you can perhaps see. And there's this distinction, this idea about puritanical attitude, very, very rigid in what it believes. Follow rules, follow traditions, don't change anything. The new morality said no, men and women should be free to express themselves. If a tradition doesn't allow for the individual rights, then it should be abandoned. We don't need to follow it just because that's the way it's always been done. There are merits to both when you look at this old and new morality concept. But there are also aspects that we see that can prove problematic with one or the other. In the story of Babylon Revisited, we have Charlie Wells, a man who wants to have his child with him. He wants to have his daughter. He's now working in Prague, Czechoslovakia is called, where they don't know about me down there. He's actually able to start fresh. Nobody knows anything about his background. He's got a job. He's making decent money. Not outlandish money, but he's making enough. And he wants his daughter back. It becomes very important that you recognize that Charlie loving his daughter may be part of it, but there's also other aspects. At the end of the story, when Charlie is not going to get a chance to do that because Marion and Lincoln have him over to their apartment. While they're there, a couple of Charlie's older friends have shown up, and they're drunk and carousing. They want him to go off with them, and he's made him feel very, very uncomfortable, and it just upsets Marion to the point where she can't deal with this anymore because it looks as if, it seems to be as if Charlie's simply going right back to the old way of life that has cost Marion her sister. And so Lincoln has to tell him that she's not ready to talk about it. Phone me at the bank tomorrow. So he calls. Lincoln tells us right at the end of the story on page 713, Marion's sick. I know this thing isn't altogether your fault, but I can't have her go to pieces about it. I'm afraid we'll have to let it slide for 6 months. Can't take a chance of working her up to the state again. Notice how he's very solicitous, Lincoln is, about Marion. How she is. Sorry, Charlie. He went back to his table. His whiskey glass was empty, but he shook his head when Alex, the bartender. There wasn't much he could do now except send Honoria some things. He would send her a lot of things tomorrow. He thought rather angrily that this was just money. He had given so many people money. No more, he said to another, what do I owe you? He would come back someday. They couldn't make him pay forever. But he wanted his child. Nothing was much good now beside that fact. Then you have this comment. He wanted his child. Maybe that sounds like a father wanting his child, right? Loving. But this is the next comment that Fitzgerald puts in. Charlie wasn't young anymore with a lot of nice thoughts and dreams to have by himself. He was absolutely sure Helen wouldn't have wanted him to be so alone. So does he want Honoria because he loves her? He wants to help her plan her future, to develop her life, to make sure that she's going to live a good life? Or he was sure that Helen, his late wife, would not have wanted him to be so alone. Honoria's just supposed to be company. Helen's death, and Marion blames Charlie for it, have resulted from a situation when they had an argument. All that had gone on, a scene at the Florida club. He had attempted to take her home. She'd kissed young Webb at the table. After that, there was what she had hysterically said. When he arrived home alone, he turned the key in the lock in wild anger. This is on page 708. How could he know? So he goes home and leaves her at the club. If she wants to be with that young guy, leave her. So he goes home, turns the key in the lock. How could he know she would arrive an hour later alone? There would be a snowstorm in which she wandered about in slippers, too confused to find a taxi. Then the aftermath, her escaping pneumonia by a miracle, and all the attendant horror. They were reconciled. That was the beginning of the end. And eventually she died. Because of course, Mary says, look what you did to my sister. How could you do that? How did I know she was going to be home alone? I thought she was going to go off with young Webb. Wandering, can't get a taxi, take her someplace. It's cold. Eventually will die. How could he know that? See, but the door of the world was open again. He had plans, vistas, futures for Honoria himself. But then he would grow a sad thing about the plans he and Helen had made. She had not planned to die. Present was the thing. Work to do and someone to love. This goes back to that new morality. Don't worry about the future and work only on the present. Well, here you go. The present was the thing. Work to do, someone to love, but not to love too much. For he knew the injury that a father can do to a daughter or a mother to a son by attaching them too closely. Afterward, out in the world, the child would seek in the marriage partner the same blind tenderness, and failing probably to find it turn against love and life. Well, this idea that not to love too much. What's too much? What's too little? Does he really love her, or does he just not want to be alone? It's important that you recognize the name. Her name is Honoria. And what Charlie wants to get back is his honor. Charlie wants his honor back. He let his wife die. Somehow he's supposed to be, how did he know she was going to be out there alone, coming down eventually with an illness, or eventually she was going to die? That wasn't the plan. And he feels and is blamed by Marion for that death. And he wants his honor back. To feel worthy of being a person and not feeling as if he's to blame for something. He wants Inori. It becomes an important aspect in the story. As you look at that, you recognize this is an aspect that's taking place. But what we also see is this Charlie, who is going to straighten out his life. He will straighten out his life. The first place he seems to go when he gets back to Paris, he goes to a bar. And he starts asking about all the people he used to be with, all of his former associates. That's what he asks about. He wants to know where each one is, and the bartender, Alex, who's known, gives him details. That they're all gone. This person back in America gone to work. Where's the snowbird? He was in here last week. Mr. Schaefer's friends in Paris, and so Charlie writes the address. He writes down the address of his brother-in-law and sister-in-law's apartment. He says, give that to Mr. Schaefer. See him, it's my brother-in-law's address. If he doesn't want to see the Schaefer, because Larry says, I think I want to see them. I want to leave them an address with somebody. He talks about his life and what life had been like. Talks about other characters. Says, I've stuck to it all right. I've stuck to it for over a year and a half now where he's not drinking, acting, not doing strong now. How do you find conditions in America? I haven't been to America for months. I'm in business in Prague. And then part that I read to you, they don't know me, about me, down there. They're trying to start clean, fresh, where people don't know him. And then they start reminiscing about other aspects. He asks about Claude Fessenden, and Alan says he's in Paris, but he doesn't come here anymore. Paul, the owner, doesn't allow it. He, being Claude Fessenden, ran up a bill of 30,000 francs, charging all of his drinks and lunches and his dinners. And when Paul finally told me he had to pay, he gave him a bad check. So I don't understand, such a dandy fellow. Now he's all bloated up. I did that. He's not doing well. He goes up and down, looking at the place where they had been previously. People were at dinner at some trim little bourgeois hedge at Duval's. He had never eaten at a really cheap restaurant in Paris. For some reason, he wished that he had, because he doesn't. They had only lived the high life. You get telling aspects that Charlie had disregarded money. He and Helen hadn't worried about any of that. Because, of course, why worry about saving money for the next day, or the day later, or a month, or years? You didn't do that. You look for the now. If we want it, you do it. He had this detail. He was 35 and good to look at. The Irish mobility of his face was sobered by a deep wrinkle between his eyes. From behind the maid who opened the door darted a lovely little girl of 9 who shrieked, "Daddy!" and flew up, struggling like a fish, into his arms. She pulled his head around by one ear and set her cheek against his. And she says, "Oh, Daddy, 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 Dads, 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 Dads." Because, of course, you get the impression that Honoria wants to see her father. That she has missed him. The situation is that Charlie's coming here, and he's trying to explain there's a lot of business there that isn't moving at all, but we're doing even better than ever. In fact, I'm bringing my sister over from America next month to keep house for me. My income last year was bigger than it was when I had money. You see the checks. His boasting was for a specific purpose. Seeing the rest of Mr. Lincoln's eyes changed the subject. So here he is, he's talking about what he's done, how he's doing. I'm making more money and doing finer than it ever was before. That's not convincing. He's not proving anything. He says that he was in the bar this afternoon. There was a man I knew. And she looks at him. I should think you've had enough of bars, because that's why you've been doing drinking. I only say a minute. I take one drink every afternoon and no more. Don't you want a cocktail before dinner? Lincoln asked. I take only one drink every afternoon. I've had that. And the Marion says, I hope you keep to it. this is a situation that we see that Charlie's trying to prove to Marion and Lincoln that he's capable of taking his daughter, of having a life for her. But the questions come up because of what his life had been like. This old morality, new morality. Is he a reformed character or not? Fitzgerald didn't give you that much. He says he only has one drink every afternoon, but when he goes back to the bar that night, he has another drink. After his friends, if you will, Mr. Schaefer and the others show up, they're all there and the nerves are strained. He says for the first time, and this is page 707, for the first time in a year, Charlie wanted a drink. And then at the very end, this is where I tell you he wants his honor back. This is what Marion tells him. They're having, I can't help what I think, Marion cried out suddenly. How much you were responsible for Helen's death, I don't know. It's something you'll have to square with your own conscience. And that becomes part of it. Charlie says Helen died of heart trouble. Yes, heart trouble. We've seen that phrase before, right? Now the story. Well, when Marion says heart trouble, she spoke as if the phrase had another meaning for her. And that becomes part of the situation that we see. Again, friends come in, things take place, Charlie leaves. And he goes back. Says he had not touched his drink at the Peters, Lincoln and Marion's house. Now he ordered whiskey and soda. So you can say he hadn't touched it, but he had a second one. Here he is, he's going to pick this up. And the result is that we see a man who is trying to reform, but he keeps going back to the same place. If you're supposed to be abandoning that lifestyle, then why go back to the very place? Why ask about those people? How much of a commitment is he really doing? And Fitzgerald raises that point, this idea about how much is he really changing. Is it the change because he really wants Honoria and to have her because he loves her? Or is he afraid to love her too much? And is it just that he knew that Helen would not want him to be so alone? That Honoria is just going to be a comfort to him, not for Charlie to be the comfort, the protector, the provider for Honoria. Which way is it supposed to be? Fitzgerald raises a number of issues about family, because of what both represent. Raises the issue about Charlie, what kind of person Charlie is. Are we supposed to like Charlie or not? You gain some sympathy for him. You can pity him, similar to what we saw with Rose Ramley and Faulkner's comment about feeling pity for him. But do you really approve of what he has done? Is he to blame or not? Well, Marion says she can't help what she thinks, but is Charlie to blame or not? You get the impression he feels he is. It's a story that, again, at the end of this, when you have some comments, some by Fitzgerald about the Jazz Age, others by some other people such as Malcolm Cowley, which he talks about life in this era. And then you have a comment to article at Calvertons and Groves, who offer comment about the family. Groves' comment is from 1927, in Looking at the World, and then Calverton is from 1928. In the Groves article, again you have excerpts from the book, it's actually a full book. This is something that's made by Ernest Groves on page 722. Again, this is in 1927 is when this book was published. Modern civilization is stimulating the increase of divorce. A large number of modern men and women express in all sorts of ways a tendency towards social instability as a result of rapid changes in modes of living. Scale down. Marriage is one of the most delicate and sensitive of human relationships, and it would be strange indeed if it did not reflect the general unrest of our times. It goes on down talking about the absence of fathers for children, affords an opportunity for children to drift into delinquency. Gives to countless husbands who finally return home restlessness and wanderlust. Talk about the war and how it impacted. Brings to both men and women temptations that lead them to deviate from formal moral standards. And then on page 723, he goes on and talks about the father is left to care for little children because of the death of the mother, faces a very difficult problem when increasingly hard to solve. An unmarried relative formerly would have offered the commonest and best solution. The new economic opportunities for women, though, have greatly changed the situation. Relatives are far less likely to feel their duty to assume a task that all recognize to be a severe test of character. Efficient housekeepers, at least for men with moderate incomes, are even more scarce than sacrificing relatives. So it's not at all surprising that we find children who have lost their mothers or fathers by death who have not been given satisfactory home life by successful remarriage of the remaining parents, so often drifting towards some sort of delinquency. Their unsuccessful social adjustment bears tribute to the social values of the normal family and reveals in a striking way the misfortunes that must come to children whose family life is mutilated by death. Many homes whose mothers are employed outside have conditions resembling those in the homes where death has removed the mother. Wow, one comment about single parent, no parent household, right? 1927. Calverton, the next article, talks about marriage itself and the idea about new and old morals. And this is what he says on page 724. Again, talk about what the war has done in the Jazz Age, etc. This is a comment he makes. The modern dance was an inevitable outgrowth of this war madness. Modern youth responded to the wild card. What mattered? To live intensely, to live furiously, to seize from life its every thrill. Such became the new motivation. The age of innocence is dead. And on page 725, he comments about the ethic that grew out of hard and trying struggle, an ethic in which asceticism was a virtue and diversion a sin. But a leisure class cannot live upon asceticism, nor exist without diversion. The old morals had crack and crumble, and so they have. The release of the new morals is closely connected with the fading of the old conception of marriage. Monogamous marriage is based upon the idea of a lifelong relationship between one man and one woman. This is the religious as well as the social ideal. He said, if we say that marriage has decayed, we do not mean that people do not still marry, nor will they not marry in the future. He said, we mean the bankruptcy of modern marriage. People may marry, but their marriage may signify nothing more binding than ephemeral affections and alliances of a fortnight. This theory of free contract is all about the modern revolutionist or free lover desires. It is marriage as we know it. Marriage of modern monogamy of the binding contract. Our system of marriage that is broken down today is bankrupt. 1928. That's when he made that comment. Raises attitudes and views. It looks at the issue about what modern marriage is and is not. This idea of connection. Your fourth topic for your short story asks you to maybe look at a social issue. Well, there would be a social issue right there that you might want to consider. It also allows for your research paper, you will, the idea about the family. That's your fourth topic, I think, on the research paper. You can be looking at that idea also in that way. So there's different approaches. Again, for the short story essay that's coming up very shortly, this allows you the opportunity to look at that one. And you have a number of strong comments. Again, these are 1927 and 1928 when these two comments were made about morality and choices and living in youth and marriage and the family unit, the breakdown of the family, what's happened. Well, have things improved over the last 80 plus years? How much have they changed from these comments? That gives you a chance to look at some of those.